The Pirate's Danger Zone. The simulation began the moment he climbed into the pod. It was a good piece of work, capable of simulating everything but him actually being injured or dying. It's why he liked it so much. Unlike almost everything in life, it didn't pull punches. He settled into the seat and smiled as everything turned on. It was game time. Hugh took a deep breath and flipped the required switches, turned a dial and engaged the lever. He scanned the readouts and frowned to see that one of the vacuum engines has a coolant leak. Luckily, things were easily sealed, and it would be a simple 2-minute job. This kind of problem was far from unknown to him. He signaled a call for the mechanic to show up as he put up his feet. A few minutes and he'd be in the air. Of course, that's exactly when the alarm sounds. "Oh no! This was supposed to be a routine flight!" he exclaims before his brow settles and he locks himself in and adjusts his seat. "I'll have to baby that engine." He powers up the ship, and in moments he's in the air as the entire cockpit lurches. He glances to the scanner and sees dozens of hostile IFF signatures all throughout the atmosphere and something big slowly approaching. A flagship with fighter escort. He scans the secondary scanning display and winces. He's the only defensive fighter in the air. 13 on one, and one of the 13 punches at a weight class so high that even a near miss will shred his ship like tinfoil. The sky is filled with foes, yet I do not fear, for I have direction. I have focus. I have purpose. Hugh says to himself as he activates a few systems. Main burn laser powered up. Plasma pulsars online. Magnetic launchers ready and primed, all 14 shots accounted for. I have a target-rich environment and itchy trigger fingers. Whoa! He hits the combat burners and the ship accelerates so hard that if not for the reinforcement in his seat and the belts holding him down, he'd have been torn out of it. His lips stretch back into a smile so huge that his every tooth gleams in anticipation. Hostile IFF zooming up from behind and he wrenches the controls back to climb. As expected, they follow. But he knows what to do. He overcharges 2 plasma shots and launches them ever so slightly forward, then spins the entire fighter 90 degrees as the slower ammunition comes close to hitting. The other ship veers away hard to avoid the mines he effectively places, and as he completes the loop, he's got a perfect shot with the world seeming to hang over his head. The main laser activates and a beam of burning light starts pouring into the enemy ship. Its defensive barriers flare into life and Hugh clucks in annoyance. It's not unexpected, but a gimme would have been nice. The barrier is holding well and Hugh makes a snap decision. He engages his tertiary weapon systems. A bit of a lead so it hits and the constant burn of the laser as a distraction and visual block. A tungsten rod moving 3 times the speed of sound slams into the enemy craft and shatters its engines. 1 down, 12 to go. 13 shots left. The rule of the day is accuracy, especially since the big one will probably need 2. The flare of a laser to his left draws his attention to his opponents. A flying V of 5 fighters are coming for him. He knew how to handle this. The most reinforced angle of his fighter is the front. A frontal charge has the best chance to deflect, resist, and dodge an attack. It also has a massive psychological effect. His main laser is burning hard on the lead opponent. Micro-adjustments to the flight twist him out of the way of plasma blasts and several blistering fast magnetic rounds. It's the latter ones that are hard to dodge. Then, as the wake of the sonic boom rattles his ship, he launches the next magnetic round. The next to center ship shatters even as Hugh fires his pulsars and veers away from crashing headlong into the enemy fighter. 2 of the 5 IFFs are gone. He pulls up and steals a glance at his crippled opponent. The plasma had reduced much of the ship to slag. The other 3 had scattered as the vaporization of a cloud is all the warning Hugh gets as he tears the ship into a roll sideways. A colossal laser blast burns through where he was. Thankfully, it was a tight beam, and he got some decent distance, so he's only got a fried paint job out of that. A flashing light has him reassess that statement. His engines were getting closer to overheating. Damn. The other 3 are now veering around him as the 6 he'd yet engaged were hitting opportunity targets. Damn! He needs to finish this fast and pick off the rest of the bastards. He hits the brakes and is nearly thrown from his seat as he swerves to the side to avoid another laser blast from the flagship bearing down from above like an angry god. That's what's gotta go next. He redlines the afterburners and climbs. He hits a button and small touches of metal chaff blast out the sides and scramble his location to the centers as he alters direction. Lasers erupt in the path of his former course as he climbs higher and higher. Atmosphere ignites around his ship, and he closes the scoops for his plasma launchers. He needs to keep the ammo in even as the cabin pressurizes and magnetically seals itself to protect him for the lack of atmosphere. The world he's defending is a gigantic orb behind him as the ship he's attacking looms like a furious mountain. First step, apply laser. The shields are exposed by the dispelling of the beam, and Hugh grins. It surrounds the ship, it doesn't hug it. That means he can get right in there. Right down the throat, he says as he gives his engines another glance. Damn. It would be right on the day he's got a vacuum engine partially down. Hopefully space itself will bleed of enough heat to keep it alive. He guns the engines and immediately gets every warning light from the compromised engine. He pushes it aside. If he doesn't drop this ship, then it drops hundreds if not thousands of lives. He angles down and dodges a massive plasma shot, pulling up afterwards as the compromised engine already starts to die. Come on, come on, come on. He spits through his teeth before activating the laser. The point of interference is barely a kilometer away, a non-existent distance in space. He blasts through the shield and unloads with his pulsars. The first shot slams into the base of the laser array, reducing vital components to slag and causing an entire section of the ship to begin depressurizing. 2 more oversaturated shots are all he can afford. Out of atmosphere, his pulsar can't do much, but what it can do is orders of magnitude beyond what it should do. He launches both shots one after another on a direct course to the highest energy concentration on the ship. The first shot burns almost all the way to the reactor of the flagship. The second that immediately follows causes a cataclysmic eruption. If sound could travel in a vacuum, then the explosion would have deafened Hugh for life. He tears away from the dying flagship and everything starts to fall apart. He pushed the engine too far. It's dead. A second series of explosions rock across the flagship and a chunk of shrapnel comes down. He manages to avoid it with only one engine, but he has to get back into the atmosphere yesterday. There are still too many enemy fighters around the planet. The atmosphere ignites around his vessel, and the things going wrong start piling on. The overtaxed vacuum engine explodes and compromises his atmospheric engines. Shit! He's got to finish this fight on the ground. Right to the wire, Hugh says to himself before toggling the ship to shift. The wings pull down and sink into themselves as they reveal massive joints and hang off them. Braking thrusters start firing to slow his descent. He's lost almost all his speed. He needs to bring the fight to him. He can do it. He can do it! He turns his radio on and broadcasts on all channels. Hello, you rating skid marks. This is Pilot Hugh 2. I've killed your way off the planet and all your friends. All your stuff is burning slag thanks to me, but you're in luck. My engines are busted. Come and get it! And there we go, target's in range. He gloats to himself as he controls his descent and fires off his main laser. Of course it hits shields, but he follows it with a magnetic launch. It goes clean through the front of the ship and it spins away to its death. From the left and right, more are coming, so he spins left and gets a fast firing solution before dropping and compensating. Plasma screams overhead as he launches 2 more rods. 2 more kills and everything shuts down. Simulation over. What got me? He asks, and the last few moments of his flight play on the screen above him from third person. One of the attacking enemy craft had nailed him with a magnetic launcher. Damn, he says with a cluck of his tongue. Score? 1 flagship down and half the enemy fighters. 75%. Rank, Martyr. Score times 100. Complications times 2 each. No backup. No colony defenses. Defective engine. Total points 120,000 new high score. Hugh watches with a slight grin as Hugh 2 is placed at the top of the list. It would be more impressive if the entire list wasn't Hugh 2, but seeing as how he beat his last high score by 10,000 points and the one before that by 50,000, he was happy to see his personal growth. He yanks a lever and all his settings and dials snap back to the basic position and he blinks a little at the brighter light in the arcade. Have fun? His mother asks, and he smiles before rushing up to her for a hug. Oh, yay! I managed to take out the enemy flagship and half the attacking force by myself with a compromised engine and no backup at all. It was great, he gushes. That sounds like a lot of work and dangerous. Are you sure you want to be a pilot? She asks him, and he nods. Yeah, I want to help and protect. I just didn't think it would be so much fun. He gushes happily and his mother giggles. At least it makes you easy to find. You've come here every day ever since it opened fully, she says, and he can't tell if she's chiding him or not, but he's too happy to care. He beat his last score by a lot. Sorry, actually. I'm not sorry because this is training. This is important. I can give back with this and help and be more than just a son or a husband or a brother. I have so much more to give than just that. You don't have to. No one will blame you if you just live well. A life of simple happiness isn't a bad one. Maybe not, but I want to give back so much. We got so lucky, Mom, and the more I think about it, the more I want to be ready rather than lucky. Hugh says and nods. I suppose that's just something I'll have to get used to. My son, the fighter pilot. Love and longing. It's all he can do to not snicker. The feast had been wonderful and deeply filling, but as the Apuk had eaten, they had grown more and more quiet. It was a pattern he had noticed with Miro Noir and her family. As they filled up, an Apuk would get more and more quiet and tired, effectively shifting all their energy to digestion as there was more and more to digest. A standard meal left them with a fair amount of energy, and in more reserved Apuk, no noticeable difference. But after a feast? After everyone stuffed themselves full? A community-wide coma. The only ones still awake were the cooks who had apparently been snacking as they went the whole day, and him. They were keeping very quiet as they were gathering the leftovers and dirty dishes, something he was helping with by using axiom to float things easily into each and pick things off the ground. He'd like to get up and help, but he's got something more important keeping him pinned down. A slight snore from Miro Noir brings a smile to his face. The buzzing of the woman's nose has her squirm a little and scooch into him. A bit of axiom, and he gently pours himself a cup of water and floats it into his hand. You still have room in there? One of the cooks asks, and he nods. Oh, yes. My appetite is an eternally increasing beast. It can be placated for a time, but it will shortly require tribute once more. Vernon jokes softly. You sound as if you're not in control of your own body, she notes as she takes a few emptied platters away. Much of it is automatic and not under the control of the conscious mind, Vernon remarks. It is for all races, but most tend to get tired after eating too much. As do humans, but it seems far less extreme in my kind. You don't look tired. I'm cuddling my wife. Not exactly a high-stress activity, he remarks as his ears start to prick up. You still look strained. There are times where being with people is more tiring than normal. Nothing more, he remarks. Which is fairly good timing as it's time for everyone to rest. He then slowly maneuvers Miro Noir into his arms and picks her up. I'll tuck her in, then help with the cleanup, he tells the cook, who shakes her head. No, no, no! Guests of honor do not help with the cooking, the setup, or cleanup. You earned the festival when you brought the beast. Tuck you wife in and yourself beside her. The chef orders, and he chuckles as he begins to rise. My thanks for the meal, then. A nap beside so lovely a lady sounds divine. You can turn it off now, she's asleep, the chef remarks, and he gives her an odd look. Pardon? You've been all kinds of sappy, sweet. Seduced a battle princess and worked your way into an old story-style romance. Don't know what you're up to, but you can stop. She's asleep. I'm not up to anything, which granted makes me sound even more up to something. But how does someone prove a lack of ill intent when it's assumed? Vernon asks, and the chef shakes her head and walks off. Oh, don't mind Gulfa. She had the mind and heart of a heartbroken and world-weary veteran when she was born, and it's only gotten worse. The more people try to explain that love, romance, happy endings, and joy exist, the more she's convinced you're trying to trick her. Another chef notes. Thanks for the meat. We'll be eating well for weeks. You're welcome, although I hardly think that eating well is a problem in this day and age. No, but it's certainly cheaper with a large gift of normally expensive delicacies. Heh, a fair point. He remarks and goes still as Miro Noir cuddles into him a little at the sound. He smiles and begins walking at a slow, relaxed pace. His wife is feather-light, and although even the lightest weights can wear on a man, axiom can keep a man from feeling tired for a long while, a trick he'd actually learned from Franklin, who included it on his first primer into axiom use. Not very healthy to have the first trick any human axiom user learn be to ignore the needs and limits of their body. The warning for burnout at the end was offhand and dismissive in tone. Something that'll need to be looked into. As he walks, he admires the architecture. It's very, very clear when the Apuk were elevated as a people. The walled-in communities with a large festival area just outside speaks to a medieval mindset that has never truly been lost. A sense of deep community and very, very close family bonds. The only reason Miro Noir had a room to herself was because she was sharing it with him. So much had been kept, not for practical reasons but cultural ones. All part of the Apuk identity. The sight of windows with both handmade shutters and tiny force field projectors in the corner brings a grin to his face. It's not what anyone would expect, but is apparently fairly common. Apparently most home worlds were like this. The major cultures would keep their trappings for the sake of tradition and identity. But beyond that, the colonies and the breakaway nations would all find their own path. Maybe someday he and Miro Noir would visit a world with flying pyramids where the advertisements are in hieroglyphics with a tiny caption in galactic trade. Of course, in a place like that, Miro Noir would either be dressed as a proper lady with an umbrella to add to a flowing dress, or more local, which is a wrap and possibly some bindings, and he shakes his head to regain some focus as he navigates the community. "My love?" Miro Noir asks softly, her jewel-like eyes fluttering open. "I'm here, just enjoying the night with you in my arms. We're heading to bed. I'm moving slow so as to enjoy the walk." He whispers to her and she smiles before adjusting her arm to drape over his back so she can scooch in that much closer. Her other hand gets a grip on his vest and clings tight. Her smile is heart-melting, especially since he knows it's for him. There had been so much he had imagined as possible when he had drifted in zero gravity and had obsessively worked out to prevent muscle and skeletal degradation, when he had, with maniacal focus, sought out bits of dust and dirt so as to avoid clogs in the life support. It had kept him busy when the lessons weren't in session, and when the million tiny frustrations of board games in zero gravity had worn his patience thin. The answer had been dice-rolling applications and a computerized board. Of course, this had led to a lot of accusations of cheating and hacking the dice. Although at times learning how it was done was more fun than the session, some people really lacked for imagination. There were only so many times that the busty bar wench being a succubus in disguise could catch someone off guard. Although Zaph's idea of the dark-eyed, thin, pissed-off, and rude court advisor being the good guy had been neat. He was that way because of the stress of keeping a realm together under an incompetent king had been an interesting twist, especially when he'd flown into a screaming rage at the very idea of usurpation, or actually having the throne. The game was carrying on for about 2 or 3 hours every other week. Most of the players were scattered across the galaxy at this point, which made for interesting interruptions. Zaph in particular had come to a game and DM'd with a perfect poker face despite being completely covered in hickeys and nearly a dozen shades of lipstick. His massive smile when any kind of explanation was asked was all the answer he would give, but to be frank, it was all the answer that was needed. "Vernon?" Miro Noir asks, and he glances down at her as she gazes on him sleepily. "What are you thinking about?" "Just how lucky we all got. Me and my people came to the starts thinking things could go terribly wrong or terrible odd. Instead, they went terribly well. We feared it would be war. We found instead love. I found love. I found you. I must say, being outside cruel space certainly has wonderful recommendations." "You mean past the advanced technology and Axiom?" "Never underestimate the appeal of love. We can leave everything else out and we'd have more volunteers than we know how to deal with to make the journey. I know I'd have had all the motivation I needed to go through it all twice just knowing you might have been there at the end." "Just might?" she teases drowsily. "Even a chance for a woman like you is all the motivation a man needs to face anything," he assures her, and she drifts off again with a big smile. Once more somewhat alone with his thoughts, Vernon smiles up at the starlit alien sky. The weaves of Axiom actually become physically visible in the upper atmosphere, giving an effect similar to the northern lights. Not quite as bombastic, often quite subtle, but slight ribbons of light that seem to connect stars and planets in the distance. Apparently, there had been a study to see if they correspond with any galactic lane or backroad. But apparently they were not. Which was a pity, but it did make sense. At the distances involved, even a magnet being tossed around by a child would have a better chance of influencing the upper atmosphere than the lanes or backroads. A little twist of Axiom and the front door of the family home opens up with ease. He slips out of his boots and sneaks through the building, rolling his feet so as to not make any noise. He slips into their room and with Axiom pulls back the covers before placing her in the bed. A bit of gentle maneuvering, and he pulls off her boots before quickly sending them to stand beside his own near the front door. He slips off the vest and changes into his soft pajamas. He takes the time to slowly undo the little knots and folds in Miro Noir's outfit and gently peel it off her. She partially wakes up and helps him along without opening her eyes. The festival clothing for both of them is left on a chair and he snuggles into bed beside her. She snuggles right back even as she pulls the covers tight, as is her way. He pulls her tight and takes a deep breath. The scent of the food, the night, and Miro Noir herself all mingle together. It's a soothing medley of comfort and a day well spent. "Vernon?" Miro Noir asks sleepily just as he starts to drift away. "Yes?" His own little responses are just as sleepy now. "Do you regret it?" she asks, and he wakes up a little more. "Regret what?" "Choosing me? You've seen my world, my ways. Any regrets?" Her eyes open and shimmer in the darkness ever so slightly as he opens his own to meet them. No. The closest thing to one is that I wish I could have gotten to be with you sooner. He stretches his neck a little to kiss her on the forehead. You're a wonderful woman from a wonderful people. There's nothing to regret. Some things to plan, but nothing to regret. Plans? She asks around a slight yawn. To get my family out of cruel space so they can meet yours, Vernon says, and she lets out some sleepy little laughs. It's so good. I guess that's why I keep questioning it. It's so good to have you, my love. I never even imagined this kind of life could be. Thank you for the dreams come true.